Amid fears of a recession and record high inflation, young adults are relying more on their parents for financial help. According to a new Bankrate survey, 68% of parents have made a financial sacrifice for their adult children. Now, Ted Rossman, Bankrate's senior industry analyst, is here with more on the survey. So, Ted, majority clearly of parents are helping out their adult children, which is defined in your survey as 18 and older. What was your takeaway from this, and how does this compare to your results in prior years?
Well, one big takeaway, I think, is it's hard to get about 7 in 10 people to agree on anything. So I do think that it's significant here that so many parents of adult children are supporting those kids. We don't have a lot of historical info. We did a study back in 2019 that was all about retirement savings, and we actually found a little bit more people back then saying that they were cutting into their retirement savings to help their kids. But, this time we got a little deeper about emergency savings and debt payoff. And I really think across the board, this is more of an issue now than it was certainly 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, I do empathize with young adults. I think it's harder now to get started given student loans, given high rents, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm looking at the results of your survey here. Specifically, at what age do you think a person should start paying each of the following items or bills on their own? And when you look at the overall results, there's nothing under the age of 20. In other words, car payments, that starts at 20, car insurance at 20. Then at 23, you have health insurance and student loans. Even if you break it down by generation, not shown on the screen there, but baby boomers, their lowest number is 19. So they think that they should be paying for youngsters car insurance until the age of 19. This seems to me a generational shift to me, because I remember 20 years ago, those numbers seem a little bit high. But why is this phenomenon happening? Can you put some underpinning behind this? Is it simply that much more expensive? Is it that more difficult to enter the labor force and establish oneself? What's going on here?
I think even if you were to back out inflation, I do think life is more expensive now than it was when, say, boomers were that age. I mean, I think there's no doubt that student loan burdens have grown, rent costs are way up, barriers to entry for the home buying market are much higher now. So I do think there are some real challenges here. You might say also that there could be a bit of helicopter parenting going on. I mean, I do think there are some risks here. Even though we want to be empathetic and we want to help our kids, I do think there are some downsides. One, I worry that parents are hurting their own finances because, hey, life's expensive for them too. And if you're going to finance a 30-year retirement and pay for healthcare costs, I mean, there are some risks to cutting into your own nest egg. But then the other thing is enablement. You don't want to be a blank check. You don't want to be contributing to this failure to launch. So it's hard to know exactly where and how to cut the cord. But, I do think it's something that multiple generations are wrestling with right now.
Well, Ted, what are some of the things that maybe our viewers out there should be considering if you want your child to be financially independent? Maybe they're not 18 yet. What are some of the steps or some of the things that people can be doing to set their children up for success?
I think financial literacy starts at home. It's often not taught in school. I think you also need to be really clear with your kids about expectations. It's great if you can afford to help. Remember that thing on the airline, though, about put your oxygen mask on before helping others. I mean, we don't want to do this to your own detriment, but if you can afford to help, do it. But maybe with some guidelines, and maybe you pay for certain things for a certain amount of time, but not forever and not everything. Or if your kids are living with you, maybe you charge them nominal rent, or they contribute to the household costs like groceries and utilities. And maybe you even bank some of that as kind of a freedom fund, and you can give it to them later on as part of the security deposit for an apartment or the down payment on a home. I think it's important to be empathetic, but also to have some guardrails and some tough love at times.
Yeah, we've seen so many things change over the last 3 to 4 years because of the pandemic, notwithstanding other exogenous factors as well. Just wondering, have the tough conditions that we experienced over the last few years, are those abating somewhat given the most recent survey or any other surveys that you've been conducting?
at least the job market's strong. I mean, that's one real silver lining here. On other fronts, it's more difficult, though. High inflation, higher interest rates, these are things that are definitely weighing on people. We see more people carrying credit card debt. We see those rates at record highs. These are things that I worry about on both sides of this, because we're saying it's hard for young adults to get started, and it is. But what about those 50 or 60 or 70 something parents? I mean, if they're carrying credit card debt in retirement, that's a tough one. And chances are their bills have all gone up, including healthcare. That's a really big one for older people. So I do think that you need to kind of strike that right balance and make sure to prioritize the relationship too, because we found in a different study that about half of people who've lent money to family or friends had something go wrong. They lost money, their credit score was damaged, the relationship was damaged. You want to be mindful of those potential consequences.
So, Ted, if people are trying to get their kids off of their bills, whether it's streaming, healthcare, you mentioned a few times, housing costs, a number of parents are helping their children out with housing, rent. If that's the case, what are some of the steps that they could do or should do in order to reduce maybe that burden in a year or two?
I think it's important to communicate early and often about this. You don't want to just cut the kids off cold turkey, but maybe have some sort of path to freedom, whether that's sort of gradually reducing the amount you're giving or being really clear about that timeline, that glide path to weaning off assistance. I also think having the kid have some skin in the game is important, whether that's paying nominal rent if they're living at home with you or contributing to other costs. It's common for kids to stay on the family cell phone plan for a long time, or maybe the parents put the bill for car insurance or healthcare, but maybe the kids can kick in for at least some of those costs. And maybe gradually the amount they're kicking in can rise. And at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, you've totally cut the cord, because part of your duty as a parent is to support your kids on this journey to being self-sufficient. So you don't want to enable their financial habits forever and ever.
Well, I know a few parental units, some friends of mine who are looking forward to cutting that cord finally with their own 20-something-year-olds. So hope springs eternal. Ted Rossman, thank you very much.